We're going to talk a little bit about chromatic aberration. This will come up in some of your files if it hasn't already. It is a sort of lens issue. It's more noticeable with digital files, it seems, than with film, although it was an issue in both. I think maybe it's because digital files not only have the lens in the front of your camera, but also have tiny micro lenses over each of the sensor sites. That could be the issue. It could be an issue that simply we're seeing more detail with our digital files than we would with the film file, so we're sort of pulling that out more, seeing it more. I don't know why, but it's there. And it's bad and gross, and we don't want it. So in the demo files, there is an image called Chromatic Aberration 01. I'm going to go ahead and open that up via Lightroom. You should probably do that too, because the solution that I have will be a Lightroom-based solution. You can do it in Adobe Camera Raw if you do it through Photoshop, but that requires you doing it to every single file individually, which I don't think you want to do. Those of you who had me in Photo 1, I told you to do this before, so maybe you know, maybe you don't. We'll see. All right, so I've opened this up and I've zoomed in way in on this nun's habit. Right, you can see over here in the navigator. Make that a little bigger. Where we are over here, and I can go over here to the tourist and over here to this obelisky thing. And when you look at those up close, you will see there is a red line here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. All right, there we have it. Red line right there, sort of green line on the other side. You'll notice that it is more pronounced here than it is above. Why is that? It's a high contrast edge. So here we have this light colored stone and blackness, higher contrast, than up here where it's light colored stone and slightly darker colored stone. Same thing over here with the nun, right? Less prevalent here where the edge of her habit is up against this light brown thing, more pronounced, in this case, sort of purple, where the edge of her habit is up against blackness. Same thing here. These are also at the extreme edges of the lens axis, right? So if we think of our lens making a circular image, right, and our sensor is taking up part of it, which you should think of it that way because that's what it's doing. On the long edges of the rectangle, that is sort of as far as you can get from the center of your lens. So your chromatic aberration is going to be more pronounced as you get off axis on the lens. Similarly, a little bit more pronounced, I think, on wide angle for that same reason. Do I know that's true with the wide angle thing? Yeah, but I think it's true, and now I've told you, so you can go out and spread misinformation to everyone. Okay, so the issue with this is that it is really hard to get rid of outside of a raw file. So if you have converted into a PSD or a TIFF or whatever, it's going to be hard to deal with. You're going to be sad. So let's do it before that happens, and let's do it to all our images. How do we do it? Here in Lightroom, we go over to the Develop tab, and then over here in Develop, first I'm going to make sure this is an old file. So when you do stuff like this, you should make sure that you are using the most up-to-date version of the Camera Raw algorithm. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to come down here to Calibration, just all the way at the bottom. And you can see, lo and behold, it is version 1. I processed this back in 1850. So I'm going to go up here and say version 5 current. That's going to change how everything looks a little bit. But since we'll be doing this to everything as they come in off of our camera, that's fine. We don't care. All right, so that's the main thing. We're going to make sure that that is set, to version 5, which is our current version. If you have version 6, you're from the future, go for that. Then we're going to scroll up here, and we're going to look for lens corrections. So with this, whoops, hit a wrong key on there. With this image selected, I'm going to come in here to lens corrections, and I'm going to click this box that says remove chromatic aberration. And I'm also going to click a second box that says Enable Profile Corrections. Now that was like sproing, so let's undo that for a sec, and let's look first at what it did for chromatic aberration. So if I go back here to the nun's habit, there was the image before. You can see this very strong magenta-y, purpley fringing. And remove it, boink, and it's gone. Come up here to where that red one was, boink, and it's gone. There is no reason not to do this. It is always the right choice. Chromatic aberration is never good. It is always bad. Get rid of it. Okay, so that was that. I'm going to go back to seeing my whole image to show you what Enable Profile Corrections does. Let me turn off info there. So profile corrections, basically there's a database of all these sort of flaws in your lenses as far as like distortion and vignetting, which is like the corners getting black. And Adobe has this list and basically just adjusts your files to make up for the deficiencies of your lens. That is a good thing, right? Especially if you're compositing stuff together, right? We don't want those corners to be darker if we want to put them next to another image that is just sort of panned over. You can always go back in and add vignetting later, but to begin with, get rid of it. It's also going to get rid of some of this distortion. Right now, this line, the lines on this obelisk-y thing, right, they're more straight and less curved, right? They're still at an angle, right? They're still kind of like, but they are not sort of like weird and bulbous and bent. Being bent is something that's hard to fix in Photoshop. Being at an angle, right, we've already looked at how to do perspective correction, so that's fine. And you can see the corners, right, up here, too dark, more even, always good. So that's a good thing, right? If you're like Henri Cartier-Bresson and you're like, oh my gosh, his nose was really important in my picture and now it's gone, you're not Henri Cartier-Bresson, so don't play. All right, so both of those things are good. Lens profile, you'll notice that it automatically knows what my lens is. If you are shooting with a strange lens that does not communicate with your camera, like a lomography lens or some lens you picked up at a drugstore, flea market, whatever, or like a really old lens, or I don't know, something. Your lens profile may not be there. You might need to go through and select it manually. It should automatically get it as long as your metadata is there in your file. So those are both good. Awesome sauce. Now to have them be applied to everything you bring in and not have to think about it ever again, just go over here to presets, make a new preset, call it Brad's, or in your case, Chromatic Aberration. You can abbreviate that CA, I do, and lens corrections. And then let's go here and check what we want on the settings. We don't need tone curve. We don't need anything at all except for lens corrections. And if you check process version, that means that the next time a new process comes out, it will need to be updated. So I'm not going to do that. You may do that. See what you think. And hit create. Now, once you've done that, that's cool. That means you can go into your library, select all of your images, and apply that to them as a preset. It's going to be down here in User Presets, Brad's Lens Profile. I've done this demo before. There's a couple of them. Brad's Chromatic Aberration and Lens Correction preset. Boink. Apply it to all those images. That's cool. But even better, when I go to import my next batch of files, I can say, come over here and say apply during import, blah, blah, blah. User presets, chromatic aberration, and lens corrections. So now everything that comes into my catalog will have those done. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to remember it, because if you have to remember it, you're going to forget it. Bad things will happen. So that is key. Make a preset, apply it to everything as you import. Your life will be better. I'm going to show you now the one time that this has been a problem. Here is a portrait of this person, and I'm going to zoom way in and look at the edge of his shirt. So you notice that the edge of his shirt has a gray line on it. That gray line is because it's a high contrast edge, and Lightroom looked at that and thought it was chromatic aberration, thought this like pink shirt was actually this sort of like magenta chromatic aberration going along that edge, and corrected for it by desaturating it. Now, you can fix that by going into lens corrections, going into manual, and you can drag that down, if that would help you. You can change the hue of what hue it's looking at, so it's more purple and less magenta. Or on that individual image, you could just uncheck your Remove Chromatic Aberrations box. I will tell you that in all of my years of shooting, this has happened to me exactly once, and this is the file that it's happened on. So it's less that you need to pay attention to that, and more that if you notice it, that's what's happening, and that's how you fix it. Okay, that is chromatic aberration, and now in the next clip, we will move along to something else.